Today I've got Mark England on the show, and I'll introduce Mark here. Mark England is a TEDx speaker, co-founder, and head coach of Enlifted. He's been researching, coaching, and presenting on the power of words and stories for 17 years. Has a master's degree in education. Mark was an elementary school PE teacher before getting into personal development. That's all he gave me. So I call bullshit. I know there's way more to Mark England than that. That's why you're here, man.
Yeah.
It's the bridge.
I'm here
So what else is there to Mark England? I've seen a little bit of a taste into Mark England in the last while that we've gotten to know each other. But how'd you get here? Maybe that's a good place to start.
It's a good start. March 11th, 2020. They said, there's a global pandemic and everybody's got to lock down. And I'm on record. I'm one of those guys. I'm on record with my family. And trust me, they thought I was crazy as a loon 15 years ago saying, hey, there's this thing coming and it's going to look like this and this and this and this and this. And it showed up. And so when it showed up, I didn't fall for that shit. Okay. And I knew, okay, this thing, they're going operational. They are going operational with something. And I need to get trained. So like a lot of people, I grew up around guns. I did a little bit of hunting, never any professional training, anything. Didn't have a concealed carry license, nothing. So I go to the gun store and I get what was and still is, in my opinion, the safest pistol that I could carry, which was a Smith & Wesson Airweight 38 snub nose hammerless gun with an 11-pound trigger, because I was way more worried about me shooting me than somebody else shooting me. And then I started taking any class I could get my hands on locally. Found out about these guys up in Fredericksburg in the Central Virginia area called Spartan Core. I was right in the middle of that thing when it was at its peak. It was super cool. Shout out to everybody involved there. And they were some special forces guys, and they were teaching the stuff that I wanted to learn. And so that went on for about 2.5 years until I had a come to Jesus moment about my preferred weapons platform as far as my rifles are concerned. I had a couple of ARs and I had a couple of AKs. And me being the relentlessly simple person that I am, I just want to have one thing, one set of ammo, and I want to get good at it. And so I said, okay. And besides, I think AKs are just the sexiest rifles out there, on top of all their other pros, in my opinion. So I got rid of everything rifle-wise that wasn't an AK, even my shotguns. And so I dedicated myself to that platform. And so I started researching it more and more. And, well, not more and more. The first query that I put into Google was, it came up Jim Fuller on the bridge with Travis Haley. And I'm like, that's a cool looking podcast. And I go on a lot of shows.
Okay.
This is my 436 podcast that I've been on, talking about just one thing. I'm a one-trick pony. One of my business partners said, dude, you're a one-trick pony. And I go, thank God. Because that's all I want. I just want one trick. And the trick is words and stories, and how they influence us for better and for worse. And so I go, that's a cool looking podcast. And I listen to it. I'm like, wow. Not only did I learn a lot about both of you all, more so the Jim, of course, I learned about HSP. And so I go on the website and I look at it and I pull down train. And they've got an AK specific course happening in Ohio in June of last year. And those aren't that common. A training was just AK-47s. I clicked the magic buttons and enrolled. And in the first 30 minutes, Jared Seagraves is talking about like all the stuff that I agree with. And I thought to myself, if these guys can hit anything with a bullet, they're my people. And you all can. And that was 15 trainings ago. So I've done 15 trainings with y'all in 16 months. I've gone on a bender. And in that process, I consider you a friend, like someone that I would call. And it's like, if I had something to get off my chest and I wanted someone to hear me out, give me some feedback, I'd call you. And same thing with Jared. And so, just to shout out to you guys, anybody's thinking about doing a training with them, pull the trigger, pun intended. And so that's been a major part of my life for the past 4 years. Learning about the art and science of guns and gunfighting. And I have been researching and presenting and coaching on the power of words and stories for the past 17. What got me into that was the old college try. I gave fighting took a swing at it. So I wrestled in high school, and in 1996 I took my first jiu-jitsu class, taking several beautiful women out of the conversation. That was the first time I ever fell in love on sight. It sounds really weird, having a man choke me and going, that's the coolest thing I've ever experienced.
I get it now.
Yeah. Because, wrestling, I was a mediocre wrestler because my buy-in was just, I enjoyed the grueling aspect of it, and it did translate well to, some street fights and things like that very well. But it wasn't submission wrestling. I was like, oh, there's an art and a science for ripping people's limbs out of socket and turning their lights out. I got to know this. And so I did the exact same thing, trained as hard as I could for 6 years, did decently well on the local amateur MMA circuit, got into Thai boxing. I won a couple of state kickboxing titles, and moved to Thailand in 2002. The plan was go over there for a year.
So you were all in.
I was all in, man. It's the only thing I wanted to do. Stay over there for a year, polish up my Thai boxing skills, come back and go pro. That ain't what happened. I ended up living over there for 10 years, which still sounds strange to say. Because when I moved over there, man, I had only had my passport for 2 years. I had 3 going away parties. I was just some guy from the, middle of Virginia moving to Thailand. That was, before the internet was really a thing, and there was no travel blogs or anything like that, and people didn't know if it was Taiwan or Thailand, and oh yeah. And so I go over there and fall right on my fucking face, bro. I went over there I moved over there with my girlfriend for a year, 10 days after my last MMA fight, and I was injured from it. And long story short, I didn't give myself any rest, no time, because I really walked into the mecca of Thai boxing, and there are gyms all over the place. It's on every single TV 4 days a week. It's their national sport. You can't get away from it, which ended up torturing me for a number of years because I got back into the gym too soon. XYZ happened. 6 months later, I'm on the operating table having my second knee surgery. And it's funny that we're going swimming tomorrow and I'm excited about it. Just to let you know. Rick's not so much, but he's going to go.
He'll enjoy it.
He'll enjoy it. The doctor said, I remember like it was yesterday, he goes, Mark, this is after he just scoped my knee. He goes, your career as a fighter is over. You could become a really good swimmer. And I made pictures of me. This is me, 27 and a half years old, swimming laps next to grandma. Not what I had in mind. and darkness descended. So I had some natural attributes, more mindset than anything. I'm a mediocre athlete, but I had some gears upstairs that helped me do well in the fights. Like I was mediocre in the gym, but for whatever reason, when we got under the bright lights, I just handled the pressure real well. And I've got a natural mean streak that we've talked about. It's an inherited thing. Thanks, Dad. And while all that was happening, I had an inferiority complex, a victim mentality, stemming from, first off, a couple of fights that broke out in elementary school. Danny Potter and Nathaniel Wood. I remember, it's funny how we remember this stuff, right? In third grade, out in the playground, they got into a fight, and I turned around. I wasn't even fighting. I turned around and ran the other way. And from that moment on, I started calling myself a scaredy cat. And I hated it. And so I get into the fight game with there's a natural passion and attraction to it, but I also used it as a way to shore up and Band-Aid all the stuff that I didn't like about myself. And I erroneously thought that I had put those monsters to bed because I'm a fighter now. Just on a specific side note for that, I knew for sure, Travis Haley, that when I won my first MMA fight, I lost my first one, I won the second one. I knew for sure that when I won my first MMA fight, I was never, ever, ever going to feel like I'm not good enough ever again. A telephobia. It's the fear of not being good enough. Look it up.
Oh, I'm having flashbacks right now. Keep going. I'm sure a lot of people are going, holy shit.
It's not that
imposter syndrome.
It's imposter syndrome. And I won my fight on a Saturday night, my first fight. The next evening, we're at the family farm, and we're at it's in Technicolor right now in my imagination, except for the charge isn't there anymore. We'll get into that. How do you turn the volume down on the scary stories? We're going to talk about. Well, actually, we're going to more than talk about it. And we're sitting there at dinner, and this wave. It was even worse than it had been before. This wave of existential dread. I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough. It just washes over me, and I walk out, and it's just the country doors, dude. I love them. I open the screen door, and it's got that spring on it, and it snaps behind me, and I just go out there and stare at the sun that's setting over the trees out in the middle of Virginia countryside, stunned, because I was wrong, and I knew that I was going to feel finally like a man because I won my first fight. That didn't happen, but I kept chasing the dragon. It was the only thing I had, and I did like the identity of a fighter. So I move over there. It's the biggest move. It's me going for it like I've never gone for anything before, and I fall on my face. And now not only am I not a fighter anymore, there's a saying, Freddie Roach says it, a fighter lives and dies in their own mind. A fighter lives and dies in their own mind. And I died as a fighter when he told me that, because I believed that spell, the definition of a spell, Webster's definition, not mine, is a word or a combination of words of great influence. And because I had very little in the way of a psychological or emotional immunity to other people's words, especially that I put in a position of power, I just took it on in and believed it. And I took that major fail, which was the best thing that ever happened to me, and at the time I used it as the final piece of damning evidence in a case that I was relentlessly making against myself, that I wasn't good enough. I was putting myself on trial every day, and that's what was feeding. Pre-workouts have nothing on the imposter syndrome when it comes to what fuels most people in the gym. And you can see it in their face. You can see it in how they breathe. You can see it in how they actually even refer to workouts. Oh, I'm smoked. I'm dead. The coach, they killed us. It was a killer workout.
Wow. Spells.
Spells, dude.
Oh, shit.
Spells, for sure. And dude, darkness descended.
I'm like deleting words in my vocabulary right now not to ever say in those types of environments.
Yeah. 60% of our coaches, it's come from a number of influential well, actually not a number, just a handful of influential podcasts that we've gone on in the CrossFit space. They're from the fitness space. And so we've spent a lot of time in there. I just did, this summer I did 17 workshops in a row on a road trip. 16 of them were in CrossFit gyms. And what we're watching is we probably have 25 CrossFit gym owners in our coaching community, and maybe 80 CrossFit coaches or fitness coaches. We're helping them change the culture in their gym. And Peter Drucker says it. He's a business guy. He said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what's one of the main substrates, if not the number one substrate of culture? It's language. And so we're helping them improve the culture of their gym by bringing awareness to the language that people are using. And what's happening is that people are they're turning the volume down. They're dismantling, because we got an issue with our language, folks. We got a glitch in our language. It's an education issue, not an intelligence issue, not a deservance issue, and it's forcing people to script victim-centric stories whether they want to feel like shit or not. And we're watching individuals and communities change out their victim mentality, and it's changing the way they approach fitness. Because when someone has a raging victim mentality, their workouts essentially are punishments for them not being good enough. And what it does is it majorly, I ended my fight career, not from a knee surgery, from a victim mentality, because my breath was trapped in my chest and I had too much rigidity in my body and I couldn't sleep all that well and I didn't heal all that well. And then there was just all the other stuff too, the addictions on top of it. And so when someone turns the volume down on that, which is easy to do if you know how to pick up a pen, even if it feels like it weighs 600 pounds.
1,000 pounds.
1,000 pounds.
Just stick with us. You'll see.
Yeah. This is going to be
a process, and I'm scared to death.
It's a good one, y'all. Fitness goes from being a punishment for not being good enough to a celebration of being able to do it. And that radically increases the longevity of someone's ability to work out well. Because one of the biggest, the two fastest ways, just on a side note, and then we'll get back to me, turning into a dumpster fire of a man in Thailand. The two fastest ways to end any kind of fitness practice is to either quit or get hurt. And most people's injuries come from distractions or comparing themselves to someone. Because they're there and they're doing this. Well, I got to do this, and I've been here twice as long, and they're already pulling that kind of weight, and then you start to disregard very important information that your body's telling you about how hard you should go. This particular, like today in the gym, don't be a little bitch. You got one. You're not gonna quit now. You got one more in you. One more in you, huh? Don't be that guy. Don't be all this. People know what that voice says. So I turn into that guy that didn't laugh for a year. I don't recommend that, because here's what the victim mentality does. Here's one of the things the victim mentality does. It sucks the air right out of people's lungs. It keeps them in a stress response. And I had all the villains to blame. I had the guy that kicked me too hard when we were warming up. I had my genetics to blame. I had everybody else that was more physically talented than I was, because that's not fair. That's not fair that they're bigger, faster, stronger than I am. I had that feeling that there was just something wrong with me and I was somehow doomed to fail. All of that kept my breath trapped in my chest. I don't think I even smiled for a year, much less laughed. And dude, I went over there with a dime piece. I went over there with my girlfriend, Heather Range, shout out to you, the hottest girl in school. Inside and out, man. That girl's laugh, I could pick it out across the parking lot of 1,000 people right now. And she had to leave, dude. She stayed.
Couldn't handle it.
Oh, there was.
She feels like she's part of the blame potentially too.
I was not. I turned into a very different person. There was no aspect of me that would have accepted her love because I was so damn bitter. I was so pissed. And so anyway, lucky me. So I lived in Thailand for 10 years. 5 of it, I was an elementary school PE teacher at an elementary school. Great gig. International school. Great gig. And then the second 5, I was a coach or a counselor at a cleansing resort down on the island of Thailand. And so once upon a time, in that initial time frame of, knee surgery, darkness, my vice principal comes back from having done a cleanse down at this spa on Koh Samui, and he goes, "Hey man," and I'd done some acupuncture in college, so I was open to some woo shit. And he goes, "They're doing some really cool stuff down there. I think you'd like it. Here's a book that their cleansing program is based off of. It was called The Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity by Daniel Reed." And I open it. I'm actually over at the pool. So I was an elementary school PE teacher. Paul Marks was the middle school teacher. And we're over there, and it's adults. We got the kids through the swimming component, and now it's free swim. And now I open this book because we're both sitting next to each other. And on the first page, it talks about the difference between traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine from a financial perspective. Oh, yeah, this one's plucked me in the nose. Traditional Chinese medicine doctors stop getting paid when their clients are sick.
Ooh, yeah, think about that one.
Where's incentive? Take this to the bank, folks. Incentive drives outcomes. The Western medical model, the allopathic medical model, when do they get paid? They get paid when you're sick. They don't get paid when you're healthy. So what is their incentive? I don't care what they say.
Wow, I've never thought of it that way. Holy shit.
And literally everything just went like that. And then I start thumbing through. This is funny. I start thumbing through. An enlightened doo-doo changed my life. I start thumbing through the book. And it's talking about meditation. It's talking about acupuncture. It's talking about breath techniques. It's talking about diet. It's talking about sleep. And it's talking about pooping. And it has a diagram of somebody on the Western toilet, and nothing's aligned, structure. And then it shows somebody squatting. And I'm like, that makes sense too. And, oh, by the way, I got to take a doo-doo. So I go, "Hey, Paul, man, I'm going to go to the bathroom, man. Here, hold this book." So I go in there and I squat down on the toilet. And everything comes out. It was one of the best poops I ever had in my life, in my adult life. Dude, I got up and colors were brighter. I took a big, huge inhale in. Here's a fun fact. The second and third most commonly purchased over-the-counter medications are indigestion medications and constipation medications. One of the main reasons is that because people's heads are on fire because of their stories and their words, and their breath is trapped in their chest. So not only are you going to not shoot as well as you could if you're holding your breath, you're not going to digest your food, and you're not going to poop all that well either. And so I took that poop, and I got up, and I was like, they're telling the truth. I'm going. So I go down there and pay to not eat for 7 days. It's a great business model. Yeah. And I feel better, dude. I mean, of course, I got some coconuts and like some broth and a couple of yoga classes and the steam room pass. And you meet just really, really interesting people. And I feel better. And I'm like, you know what, dude? This is the first time I remember wisdom visiting me. I go, are you going to be bitching about this when you're 55? The flash, because I was never that good anyway, dude. The flash in the pan fight career, are you going to be that guy? Because if you are, and I saw that version of me, And I go, if you do that, because you could, because people say, I can't keep living like this. No, actually, you can keep living like this. That's the scary thing. If you let yourself look down that path, you can totally keep doing everything you're doing. You just don't like the outcome. It might not feel good right now, but you can totally keep doing it. Don't lie to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I see this version of me and I go, dude, if you do that, then you really are a loser. So I go, I'll take anything but that. And also I was like, okay, I can participate different in my life this way. So I kept going. I started going down to the spa. I went down there numerous times. The third time down there, I went to an emotional detoxification workshop. And me and all my wisdom, I laughed at the title. I was like, emotional detoxification. And I went, thank God. Because I saw that the second time I fell in love on sight was when a guy by the name of Barry Musgrave, who turned into my mentor in this work, he's 80 now. He lives in Athens. He takes care of an ashram and sees one client a day. And I watched him take a woman's, very embarrassing, public breakup story and turn it on its head with one word. But he had to get to that one word. And not only did he have to get that one word, he had to get to the sentence first, the Lord of the Rings spell that held the whole thing together. He knew what he was doing. He had her tell the story. And she's crying, angry, and then he had her tell it again. This time he made some adjustments in the words, and you could see something start to happen. She's not as wasn't crying so much at all, really. She was angry in tears the first time through. The second time through, now she's sad, no tears, and her body language is starting to change. And the third time through, he stopped her at that one sentence, again, that held the whole thing together, the Lord of the Rings spell, word or a combination of words of great influence, and he had her repeat it 3 times. So everybody in that yoga sala was looking at the same sentence. He did that to me. He did that to me. Say it again. He did that to me. And he goes, that last word, take out that last word and put in himself, the word himself. And it was such a radical departure from the story that she was, because it's not necessarily the story that gets us, it's the repetition of the story that gets us. Something might happen that's ouchy, but we replay it 1,000 times in our head and blame life. It's weird. And so it was such a radical, she had been super pissed about this for 4 years since it happened, so much so she turned into a man-hater, hadn't gotten in a relationship since. And she goes, it was so different. Her delivery was clunky, and it went up at the end. It's called up talk. She goes, he did that to himself? And then you see the breath unlock. He did do that to himself. And then she started talking about how it got worse for him. And then finally she goes, that was never going to work out anyway. He was actually really weird.
Just flip the story.
So a complete judo chopped it right in the nose. And I saw that and I was like, that's one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. And I've got a he did that to me story. But I was as guarded as it gets. I had just enough incentive, reason, as in the quality of the rest of my life, to get in the room. And so he paired everybody up at the end. He's like, okay, here's what you do. You got 6 minutes, and then you switch. So one's the coach, one's the client. And I got paired up with this woman, and I'm the coach first, and she tells me this story, and I'm like, doing what he said. And then he goes, okay, switch. And I look at her, and I go, I'm sorry, I'm leaving now. I'm not talking to you about anything. Because I wasn't talking to anybody about anything. Oh, fuck no. But I took action. I walked out of there and went to the internet cafe immediately. Went straight there and printed out an 80-page manual about how to start working on the story that you're telling yourself. That's what mindset is, everybody. You could leave it to Google. You could leave it to the first 17 answers that you're going to get on the first page of Google if you Google what is mindset, the definition of mindset, and you think, well, take out you, put in me. I would think, or if I wasn't in this space professionally for so long, I would think that something that's so frequently talked about, there's a standard definition of it. There's not. You ask Google, you get 17 definitions on the first page alone, and half of them it's a paragraph long, and you got to have a philosophical discussion about it with somebody who's a philosopher.
And then and just interject here, try to ask a military guy, hey, what does mindset mean? You'll get 3,000 different answers.
Correct. It's really hard to work on something. I'm working on my mindset. If you don't know what it is, if you can't simply tell what it is, and take it with a grain of salt, because I'm one of the co-founders and the head coach of Enlifted. At Enlifted, we got the best definition in the game.
I would agree.
Enlifted's definition of mindset is very simple, which is a calling card of the reps, having distilled something down to a functional essence. It works. Simplicity. Enlifted's definition of mindset is the story that you tell yourself. You all are telling yourself a story to yourself, about everything in your life. You're telling yourself a story about your body. You're telling yourself a story about your money. You're telling yourself a story about your friends and family. You're telling a story about your job, your business. You're telling yourself a story about the government. Just whatever it's a story.
It's so awesome. Yeah.
It's a story, and guess what that story is made of? It's made of words and breathing. Those are the two foundational components of mindset. It's the words and the breath, and that's the level that we play at, because once again, I don't know if I've said this yet, I'm a very simple guy. That's one of the reasons I love AKs. And
you did.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah, and it comes through in what we do and why we do it. So that was 20 years ago that I went to that workshop. And so I'm a big believer in attraction's not a choice. You can't talk yourself into being attracted to someone. You can't talk yourself out of being attracted to someone. Interests, it's not a choice. I see them more as gifts, and you got to pay attention to it. You got to pay attention to what you're innately attracted to, innately drawn to, and play it out. See it out. See what the thing is. See what's there for you, because there's usually some gifts. Sometimes it's the gift. And on a side note, after watching, I was on for the first 10 years of my coaching career, I did a lot of work in yoga circles. Okay. They like breathing well. Yeah. And they're very open to self-inquiry, exploration. And man, I watched a lot of people reduce themselves to tears with the sentence, I need to find my purpose. I need to find my purpose. And after me watching people make themselves cry with that spell, I'm like, okay, well, what is that? What's happening there? And I'm like, okay, well, let me just look back. I didn't know when I saw that transformation in that yoga sala that this would be one of my purposes. All I knew is it was cool. Okay. And it was an interest. I was interested, strongly interested. So here's a good metric that will help you not make yourself cry with, I need to find my purpose. Because people outside of yoga do that too. Like for a thinking man, that'll drive him nuts if that gets in his head. Explore your interests. Whatever you're interested in, explore it. And this helps with kids too. Okay, whatever they're interested in, explore it. See what's in there. Explore your interests, develop your passions, and commit to your purposes. After it took me 10 years of full-time work in this game and it happened in a flash, to recognize that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to study and teach the Abracadabra for 50 years. It took me 10 years of doing it full time for me to get all of the feedback externally and internally about what this is for me to go, you got me. And we talked about this at breakfast, and I can elaborate on that more. And yeah, so the words that we use, we're spelling on ourselves, folks. Okay, that's why it's called spelling. Spells. Abracadabra, teaching the abracadabra. Well, what's that? When I say abracadabra, what do most people immediately think of? I already know the answer. There's a few people usually in the crowd that go to Steve Miller Band, but that's okay. I'm gonna reach out and grab you.
Don't put that in my head.
Yeah, sorry, too late. People think magic. Well, guess what? There's more to it than that, a whole lot more to it than that. Please, if you got kids, share this with them. If you have anyone interested in personal and professional development or working on their mindset, share this with them. Abracadabra is Aramaic, and it's an ancient language. Yes, it's still alive, and it's one of the two languages Jesus spoke. It's the language the original Old Testament was written in.
And Judaism, too, or Hebrew, it was in Hebrew. It was a translation that was very similar to the Aramaic transmission.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It translates to with my word I create, or with my word I influence. And the teachers, the metaphysicians of the day, they would triangulate it and wear it around their neck to remind them of the power and the mechanism of the spoken word, because they knew that if whatever they wanted to do in life, that if their language was working against them, and most people's language is working against them, that whatever they wanted to do in life was going to be way harder than it had to be. And then conversely, if I learn, it's a skill set, everybody. If I learn to use my words to stay focused on what's important and keep the drama down and build myself up in my self-image and in my feelings and emotions, and oh, by the way, while I'm at it, unlock my breath so I'm a good listener and I can pay attention, which is 80% of everything. I can use my words to do those things, then I can essentially solve any problem. Yeah. And half of the problems aren't even problems anymore. They're just is what it is. Call me old-fashioned. I think being able to use my language, and when I say language, everybody, I mean internal dialogue and external dialogue, what we think, what we say, what we write. To use our language, our words, to make mountains into molehills, because most people are making molehills into mountains. That's cool. Because guess what? The clock's ticking. We got a finite amount of time, and you don't know when this song stops. So, and yeah, we'll get into deathbed regrets later. But anyway, so, and I was shitting in my pants, bro. And I still did it. So January 17th, 2007, that spa that I had been going down to, I taught for 5 years, and I was like, I want to go do this instead. I put my poster up next to all the other practitioners at that spa, because I befriended people there, and I'm now a coach there. I'm now a practitioner, and I did it right in the middle of busy season, and I got busy immediately, and I've stayed full-time since, somewhere between full-time and overtime the whole time. And I deliver all the trainings in Enlifted. We've certified 430 coaches so far. My business partner and I, we've been in business together for 9 years. Shout out to Adam Chin. Love that guy. We have our own podcast, Kimberly Kesting. She's the host. Diamond. And we're going to see what we can pull off in 50 years, because most people don't have a time frame like that.
Yeah, explain that. You said,
Yeah.
I forget how you worded it earlier, but it's something like I'm going to do this for the next 50 years.
Correct. This is what I'm going to do with my professional time for the next 50 years.
Why 50 years specifically? Why not 5-year plan, 25, whatever, until I retire?
You should have a podcast, because you ask good questions. So, and this is another gripe I have with the medical industrial complex. And my mom participated. Okay, she's the one that used talcum powder. Johnson & Johnson settled a class action lawsuit because their talcum powder gave women ovarian cancer, and they knew that shit. And my mom used Johnson & Johnson baby powder. She got ovarian cancer and died. And it was a lovely 18 months of chemo, radiation, and therapy. And every time she went in that place, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And I was 20. And that also fueled I was mad as hell about that. Very unexpressive emotionally. And I took that shit out on people. Fast forward 13 years, I got a check for $250,000 from that, from her life insurance. Not that, she wasn't part of the lawsuit, but and it hit at the perfect time. So I take that money and I circumnavigated the globe numerous times. And there was a lot of great systems and stuff out there that I didn't know about. And I went and studied with 8 of the 9 founders of the systems that were most impressive to me, just on gut instinct. I was like, and I would show up early, do sessions with them individually if they were available, take the trainings, hang out with their coaches, I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I know what I was doing now. Pop the hood on the community, see how the thing, see what you like, see what you don't like. And one of the systems that was most impressive to me, mainly because of how many conversations that it kickstarted about language, was NLP, neurolinguistic programming. So in 2010, 11, I went over to London and did my practitioner training with Richard Bandler, who's one of the founders. And I went back the next year and got my master's practitioner training with Richard Bandler. And half the reason I went over there was I just wanted to watch the guy work. I wanted to get in the room with him because I knew he would take people on stage and you know.
Doesn't he have a book?
He's a lot of them.
I think I have it right here. Somewhere.
Yeah. The first 2 books that he and
NLP book, yeah,
Grinder wrote were the Structure of Magic 1 and 2.
Okay.
And it was the first time that anyone and I mean, I've been in this space a decent amount of time. That's all I do professionally. And I'm also a little ignorant about what goes on in there because I'm too busy doing our shit, but not for a period of 3.5 years where I went and studied stuff like hardcore. And so half the reason I went, I just wanted to watch this guy work. And the thing that I got out of that was a question. The thing that I got out of that whole thing was a question. Not any of the training, not any of the nothing, a question. So that guy, he was on stage, and this is exactly how he did it, dude. He goes, I've been doing this shit for 40 fucking years. Just like that. And I watched him do that and say that, and I go, I wonder what that feels like. I wonder what that feels like to do something for 40 years. And guess what? There's only one way to answer that question. And so that thing clicked into place. That question clicked into place in 2017 after I got off stage at TEDx and we knocked that shit out of the park. And I go back home to the hotel room and sit on the bed and stare at the wall that turned into this mosaic of what is going to happen. And it was weird, dude. And I go, okay. And I remembered that. I remembered him saying that. I remember me asking that question. I go, I'll do it for 50. I'll do it for 50. And I got my laptop out there. I went into my calendar and scrolled down to January 17th, 2057. I might even take a half day. And that's my that's my last day on the job, dude. And because I want to know what it's like to do something for 50 years. I want to know what that feels like. And I also want to see what we can pull off in 50 years. Tony Robbins said, he goes, people profoundly overestimate what they can do in 1 year and profoundly underestimate what they can do in 10. He goes, you got to learn to think in decades. He didn't say that. One of our mentors, Adam, my business partner, one of our mentors said, you got to learn to think in decades. File that under another thing you didn't learn in high school. You didn't learn how to use your words to stay focused and keep the drama down and unlock your breath and unpucker your butthole, because that happens when you go into a stress response from the floor to the ceiling. You're tight. And dismantle the victim mentality. You didn't learn how to use your words to do that. Okay? And you didn't learn how to think in decades.
It's a long game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. can keep riffing and ranting on things.
Something you said in the last few classes that I've asked you to come out and share more and more. You talk about, insecurity, confidence, and comfort.
Yeah.
What's the difference between those three words?
Yeah, there's major differences. And just hearing that there's something past confident, I've been sharing this model with our coaches and people for a number of years now. And I watched light bulbs go off. So, and on a, imposter syndrome side note, what most people think they have when they start something is the imposter syndrome. No, they don't. They have the beginner's syndrome. So beginner's syndrome is low confidence and low skill set. And they think it's the imposter syndrome. That's not what that is.
Okay.
And so whatever it is, when I first started jiu-jitsu, I was insecure about it. Guess why? Because I had no skill and why would I have, well, if I had no skill and I had confidence, then I would be an imposter. See, imposters don't have imposter syndrome.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so that's where most people start. Same thing with and I'm still the new guy for sure when it comes to gun training. I didn't know anything. And so I was insecure getting around other people that did. And guess what happens, everybody? If you're a normal person, 3% of the population, it's called ponerology. Look it up, the study of psychopathy. 3% of the population are psychopaths, and most of them most of them go into, like the Michael Jordans of psychopathy, they go into politics because that's where they can have the most influence, and it's the safest place to play that game.
That's right.
And so if you're one of the 97% of the population, when you start out, you're insecure at something and you see people that are better than you and you're like, wow, that person's so confident, man. I wish I had can't wait to get confident about it, which you do in conjunction with developing your skill set of the thing. So your confidence and your skill set and your confidence rise simultaneously. The better you get, the more confident you get. And most people think that that's the end result, which is I'll take confidence over insecurity every day and twice on Sunday. And there's a promised land after that it'll help you get there if you know. Some people do. Some people just keep on going and they just relax. And knowing that there's a destination after confident, comfortable. Insecure, confident, comfortable. So this similarity between insecure and confident, they're both of those people are holding their breath. That's their commonality. Okay, they look completely different. So insecure is, and it can be a holding at the bottom or a holding at the top. Mm-hmm. Something happens, or something happens. Okay, or confident, or like that. My breath is locked up, and that's going to impede the flow. And I've said this before, and you didn't fight me, so I'm assuming the sale on it. You're not a confident shooter. You're a comfortable shooter. I've seen you shoot. That's the only way people flow. I've seen you shoot, flow, look like a ballerina, talk about lunch, make fun of Jared, all at the same time. I'm like, that's I love you, dude.
It's comfortable, man.
Exactly. That means you're doing what you've trained to do, and your breathing is fluid. You're flowing. So if you want to get there, which if you want to make things look easy, that's people that make things look easy, they're in that comfort zone. And two of the fastest ways to get there is, one, know that that's a real destination, and two, you got to get your breath unlocked. You got to get your breath unlocked. which does dovetail really well back into mindset, because the reason why most people are holding their breath is because their stories are working against them. Their language is working against them, and they got a dog shit story in their head saying really not nice things. Oh, by the way, and the scary stories, the traumas, the unfortunate things that have happened to people, those stories are kept in their head. And very rarely does any kind of legitimate resolution happen when people keep the scary stories in their head. And so I started noticing this immediately when I started taking gun trainings, is that there are people that are good shooters. They've been practicing a lot. They're up on the firing line and they'll run a drill. And then when they're done, they go, I mean,
How many times you hear me yell, breathe?
Relentlessly. That's why you know the game. That's why I study under you. And then if they don't have a perfect ragged hole in the thing, or they just one flyer, they just drop their head and go like that. And I'm thinking to myself, surprise, no wonder, okay? Because this stuff shows up. It doesn't just show up in gunfighting, in training, okay? It shows up everywhere. The imposter, the victim mentality, it's the real scourge of Earth. There's nothing has a higher kill rate than the victim mentality. There's nothing on the planet that's more addictive than the victim mentality. It's the most addictive shit out there. What's more addictive than your own voice? What's more seductive and addictive than your own voice in your own head? And if people don't have any kind of understanding about what it is and then how to get it under control and working for them, then they're sitting ducks. They're absolutely sitting ducks.
That's why we say when we go up to your target, how do we tell people to look at it?
Whoever came up with that is genius.
Jared.
Yeah. Look at it like it's someone else's target.
Yeah. Stop judging it like it's yours. Look, if I walked up to yours, I'd be like, oh, Mark, it's not a big deal. Look, you just your effectiveness is here. Here's some pattern recognition, blah, blah, blah. But like that's going back to the new shooter that shoots a big group and goes up and goes, fuck, I suck. Like you're brand new. You just started. Or the new shooter that goes up with that big ass group and goes, I love this shit. I love this. This is the learning. But there's the story right there. And I kind of look at high school, college, and like football is a good example. High school insecure, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't know a whole lot. They're learning. Yeah. Even if they start in the Pee-wees, you're still going to have this insecurity because you're trying to make it big. I want to go to college. I want to play collegiate ball. Then you go to college and you see confidence. You see a lot of confidence. You see a lot of hard hitting, a lot of energy. It's a little bit more controlled than the chaoticness of high school. Jumping up out of the huddle, jumping up off the ground instead of guys helping each other up. Mm-hmm. Like you start to see it slow down in the professional world where the confidence is still there, but the comfort starts to kick in. And I think like there's a bunch of studies about, look at the top 5% of athletes or Olympians or professionals in the world. The reason why they're the top of their game is because of the story they tell themselves in their head. Whether they win or lose, they still say, fucking love this. I love this game. I love this lifestyle. And you see that in guys on the beaches and buds or amphibious reconnaissance schools. I use those two as, cold, wet, tired, hungry, not eating for a long time. You're, with all that food and sleep deprivation, it makes people want to, quit. And it's like I look next door to the guy that was there last night and he's not there today. I go, he didn't love it as much as I did. But then all the other things in my life that I didn't love or fell out of love with, the story changed and darkness happened for me. I mean, just,
yeah, it's a common story. And on that note, I think it was the first guy Sean Ryan interviewed was a BUDS instructor. And he goes, can you tell who's going to make it and who isn't? And the guy goes, oh yeah, to a 99.9% certainty. And he goes, well, what's the metric? What's the lens? He goes, do they want to be there? Do they want to be there? And so that holding someone's breath, here's another one for you, everybody. The biggest impediment to information retention is tension.
Say that again.
The biggest impediment to information retention, also known as learning, is tension in the body. And if you're tense, then your breathing is trapped in your chest. I'm going to sound smart for a second. It's called amygdala hijack. Look it up. When someone goes into a stress response, and most people live in low-grade, mid-grade, some high-grade stress responses, they're walking around with their breath trapped in their chest and everything like that. Your listening tanks. You lose access to creative faculties. You have problems recalling information. And so if you show up to learn and you're breathing well and you're loose, that whole osmosis thing, it's more than it's a real thing. And you'll be a better learner and you'll have more fun and you won't talk yourself out of the game. Because most people talk themselves out of the game. Most people have black belts in talking themselves out of shit. And it comes down to how they put their words together. So I was with you guys last weekend down in Palm Bay. And we're in the shoot house. And if you miss, you're out. And I go, if I miss, I go back to the Airbnb and I'll be clicking those magic buttons and enrolling in another one of their courses immediately. That's what happens if I miss a shot. Oh no, because I'm going to do that anyway. I'm coming back. Good luck getting rid of me. It's like, so it's, I mean, how do you contend with that? You want to get all Chris Williamson about it. I forget them. There was a name for it. He said the hardest people to compete with are the people that have some talent, that have a work ethic, and are having fun. You put those three people together, and you basically all you can do is hope to keep up. Yeah. So insecure. Most people start insecure. They're praying for a sliver of confidence. Know that and you gotta unlock your breath, which you can. Which is it's easier than it's. Okay, let me take out easy. It's worth doing. Because the quality of your life is what's at stake. Good luck enjoying being you if your breath is trapped in your chest. Good luck feeling comfortable in your skin if your breath is trapped in your chest. Good luck being the kind of person that people are at ease being around, even if you're a killer, with your breath trapped in your chest. Oh, by the way, guess what? You're gifting that to your children. We inherit.
It's an insane ancestral curse, man. I deal with it. I mean,
we inherit our parents' breathing patterns. People think that you also inherit their language.
Oh yeah.
The sounds they make out of their face. You're a little tyke. Just came out, and they're just making sounds on top of you, over you. The sounds that they're sharing. You're being bathed in them. Very rarely does a child that grows up in a high stress environment, also known as everybody's holding their breath, come out cool, calm, and collected. It's called entrainment. It was first noted in the Swiss clock shops in the 1600s that all of the smaller clocks would come into synchronicity or harmony. All the smaller clocks would get into rhythm with the big clock. What do you think parents are? What do you think kids are? We entrain ourselves to their rhythms, and one of their rhythms is their breathing. And so if you want to gift your children the keys to their kingdom, which is their ability to enjoy their life, explore their interests, develop their passions, commit to their purposes, unlock your breath, and watch what happens. I'm riffing. This guy signed up for one of our certs about a year ago. And so I get on a discovery call with him, and he goes, I just want to let you know I'm signing up. These calls are an hour long because I want to know about them. I want to know how they got there. I want to know that they know what they're getting themselves into. And right out the bat, he goes, I'm already signing up. I just want to talk to you. I want to tell you how I got here, why I'm here. And I go, talk to me, Goose. And he goes, I heard you on a podcast talking about your father passing and how you surfed that with elongated exhales. Because when the exhale is longer than the inhale, you're staying parasympathetic, even in the fire. And he goes, that stuck with me. And he goes, my wife, we have a 3-year-old son. And my wife just gave birth to our daughter, and it was a complicated birth. And he said, I was in the room, she was in the room, our 3-year-old's in the room, doctors and nurses coming out, bells and noises, and my son's going nuts. And he goes, in that moment, I remember that podcast. You never know who's listening. And he goes, I thought to myself, I could do one of two things. I could either say something to him, or I could start breathing low and slow. See what happens. And he said, I got my breath low and slow and kept it there. And within 3 minutes, his son crawled up on his lap, put his head on his chest, and took a nap in the middle of that shit. And he goes, that's why I'm here. That's why I want to learn about what you all do. And I want to coach with this. He owns a CrossFit gym too. Shout out Justin. And yeah, you win the breathing game. You win the whole
changing
game.
Your physiology immediately.
Majorly. Yeah. And everybody around you wins.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about the and I think you have been talking about it, is a lot of these fears. I get a lot of students in class that'll say, I'm just, it could be imposter syndrome. I've had instructors that I've, had through vettings, and they'll sometimes come out, the ones that don't make it will say, man, I'm never going to be as good as you. What do you want from me? I'll never make it to that level. Like this fear of not being good enough.
Correct. Telephobia. That is the verbatim definition of a telephobia, the fear of not being good enough. Telephobia. Look it up, everybody. There's a name for this thing. That's a really good thing. That's a really good thing. And if we're talking about a telephobia, let's more than talk about it. The victim mentality. Most people have never heard the definition of the victim mentality. We've been talking about it full-time, professionally for 10 years now. I've shared it with a lot of people. Just having the definition sends off light bulbs. And in my personal and professional opinion, it's somewhere between very hard and impossible to have a well-rounded conversation about mindset without at least a working definition of the victim mentality. I'm about to recite the verbatim definition of the victim mentality twice, because that's where most people start their exploration. I went to that. If things were going well for me and the sun was out, do you think I would have gone to that emotional detoxification workshop?
No.
Fuck no, I wouldn't.
That's a good point.
People don't book in for a coach. They don't pick up personal development books. They don't get into this stuff when the sun's out and they got this and everything's going well. No, they have a problem. They're stuck somewhere. Something's not quite right, and they start scratching the surface, and you are going to run into the victim mentality. So I'm going to do this twice. Most people have never heard the definition of the victim mentality, much less written it down. So get a pen and a piece of paper and put pen to paper on this, and you're in a special club. So here it is. I'll do it slow the first time, and then I'll speed it up the second time and add some polish. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. The victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process and attributions. That's the verbatim definition. Here it is again, a little faster with some context. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends, it's a tendency, everybody. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. A person tends to regard himself or herself or zerself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. Second sentence, right between the eyes, right where it belongs. The victim mentality depends, circle that word, on a habitual, underline that word, thought process and attributions. It depends. The victim mentality depends. It has to have a habitual, which accurately implies duration and addiction. Thought process. What's a thought process? Glad you asked. You have one. It's how you use your words. And then attributions. What's an attribution? It's a characteristic. And after the words that you use, breathing is the second thing that we look at. They go hand in hand, and we're known as the language people. That's cool. It's cool to be known about for anything. And like I said out there, push comes to shove, it's about the breath. I'm there to help people change the words to unlock the breath, because I'm not interested at all, and even if I was, I wouldn't have answers for people's life. I'm here to create space and clarity for people. That's it. Because when they have that, they're back online. They'll navigate way better. And yeah. Wait till we get into that story.
No, it's great.
Dude, the victim mentality, it's again, knowing that there's a name for this thing and that it's coming from glitches in our language. So let's go back to that woman who had that story about the bad breakup. Let's look at that sentence that held the whole thing together. He did that to me. That's called a projection. And because 2 plus, as it's reliable as 2 + 2 = 4, if somebody has a "he did that to me" sentence in their story, whether they like it or not, they're getting the victim-villain mental imagery. They're getting that dynamic. A person's in there, and they're in there, and they're on the receiving end. And that's stressful. And when that breath gets trapped in the chest, amygdala hijack, another part of the one of the things that happens when we do that is we get hyper-focused on something, and it's very rarely the good stuff. Breath trapped in the chest, you get hyper-focused on the bad stuff. It's like wind sprints. There's a mechanics to storytelling. You go out and run wind sprints, what happens to your field of vision?
Narrows.
It narrows. Where is your breath when you're running wind sprints?
High and tight.
You go out on a walk and slow down by 30%, so now it's not even a walk, it's a stroll. What happens to your field of vision? Zooms in or zooms out?
Zooms out.
It zooms out. Where's your breath?
Lower
and slower. And so it's the same thing with our storytelling. Most people aren't paying attention to the words that they're using. They're not paying attention to their breath, and they're not paying attention to the rate of speech. The rate of the story is a major lever when it comes to changing it. So take this to the bank, everybody. The faster the story goes, the harder it is to change. The faster the story goes, the harder it is to change. It's like somebody that comes out and they're just running all the drills so fast. It's hard to give them, even if you have the best piece of information of the thing that they need to fix most, it's super hard for them to implement that because they're going too fast. The faster the story goes, the harder it is to change. And the fastest way to slow down a story is to write it down. And once a story is written down, it's the same thing as cars. Who goes out to the highway and goes 80 miles an hour and pops a hood and starts changing parts? Nobody. You got to park that thing. It's the same thing with a story. Park a story, and that pen can feel like it weighs 1,000 pounds. There ain't no free lunch here, everybody. Getting these stories, which we'll get to when we get to it, out of your head and written down, it's one of the very best things that you can do if you want to work on your mindset, which is the story that you tell yourself, which is built of what? Words and breath. I mean, good luck separating those two things, by the way. And, and so if you learn how to dispel spells and dispel. Dispel means to cast out or unlearn. I've got it tattooed on one of my arms. Unlearn means to undo the effect of. To dispel or unlearn the victim mentality, then you're going to unlock your breath. And you're going to like yourself a lot more. And other people, I mean, there's so many wonderful things happen when that happened. How about letting people love you?
Oh, when you pretend, you miss out on the opportunity for those things. Yes, I've learned this in the landmark programs, like the sense of relief that I was missing out on by pretending to be something that I wasn't. My big thing back then was like, they said, you're pretending that, fill in the blank. I was like, pretending? What am I pretending? Ooh, I'm pretending that I have all the time in the world to help anybody I can at any time until I realize, holy shit, I'm all out of time. That was my big problem. I was always trying to overcommit, overpromise. I can do this. I can be a jack of all trades. Like I did fucking tattooed it on my body, you know? And I just ran out of time, and I ended up being disappointing others. You know, I by pretending I was missing out on a sense of relief. I was missing out on a sense of 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 pride in what I'm doing instead of just running rapid. You know, I was missing out on my family, time with my kids, and my beloved, and it just went on and on and on. I was like, holy shit, starting to unlock stuff. And then I started feeling so much better about myself and realizing that I need to put healthy boundaries in place. And if I don't right now, I'm going to just continue to hurt people by abandoning the anatomy of trust.
Very
That was
well
my,
said.
yeah,
Landmark's legit.
it's a good program.
Anything that helps you think about your thinking, in my opinion, is worth it. Let's get all Alan Watts for a second.
Awesome.
My favorite Alan Watts quote. And you want to do something fun? Go to YouTube, everybody. Put in Alan Watts chill step and just pick one of those 15. And it's just super smooth, cool, chill music. And then every 4 or 5 minutes, it'll be a little segment from one of his talks. He said, when you learn to think about your thinking, you become alive in a new way.
Yeah.
When you learn to think, most people aren't thinking about their thinking, they're just thinking. There's a difference. You become alive in a new way. And you start to, I mean, again.
It's like that guy who came up with that thinkers before.
Shooters?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Shameless plug there.
That whole thing. Yeah.
You had me write a story earlier just before we walked in here and sat down. You talk about a 4-stepping process or model that you use. And this is what I'm a little nervous about, but you had me write this hard story, hard for me to tell. And I chose this story for you to help me break down and go through this process because, I think a lot of people can maybe relate to it, where everybody's going to eventually lose somebody in their life. Somebody you love, somebody you care about. And I'm not going to go into war stories here. I've told stories before of that, but I think not everybody can relate to necessarily a war story. And so this is a story about the most famous hero you've never heard of. But what is 4-stepping before you crush my soul here? I mean, as much as I love mind architecture and these journeys, I'm a little nervous, but help me on this journey, man. What are you about to do to me?
Well, it's instead of what am I about to do to you, it's what are we about to do for you? And what are we about to do for people that are watching and that are interested in learning about what they can do with the stories that they tell themselves about things. And I lost my dad a year ago too, in the summer. It's been a year. I get it.
Yeah, same time almost as mine.
Yeah, spooky. So there's this thing. It's called 4-stepping a story. And there's 4 steps involved, which is why it's called 4-stepping. It'd be really weird if there was 9 steps and we called it 4-stepping. There's 4. Step 1, and it's rocket science. It really is. It's very complicated. Good luck understanding it. Step 1, title the story and write it out conversationally. What's conversational writing? Glad you asked. So conversational writing is writing as if you were telling the story, because you are telling the story, full sentences with punctuation. I don't make the rules. Half sentences and bullet points, or 2 short sentences about a story like that. It's not enough to summon the magic or summon the feelings or get into it. So when it comes to, and this thing called 4-stepping, it's not context dependent. We're plugging in a story it's likely going to be a mixed bag for you of feelings and emotions. And we'll see where it goes. I have an idea, an educated guess of where it's going to go for you. And you can plug in anything you can 4-step any story. as the old saying goes in Enlifted, if it can be written down, it can be four-stepped. Okay, you can plug an injury into it, an abuse into it, a death into it, a divorce into it, a failed business, anything that goes ouch, you can plug into it and unlock your breath in context to the story. You can also plug in other kinds of stories of a more positive nature, stories that you want to feel, wins that you've accomplished, progress that you've made. Okay, well, let me back up a little bit. Guess where people keep their stories? Up here. People are profoundly underwritten, and I'm not talking about insurance. That's a bad joke you can laugh at. And gotcha.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what happens when a story stays in the head, as far as the ouchy stuff, they get replayed a lot. The stories are up close and personal. The breath is trapped in the chest. It's quite meaningful. When it comes to the more positive things, again, I don't make the rules. This is just how it works. Like the good things that we've done and the times people have been there for us, and the progress that we've made, those stories kept in the head, they're way over there and not very meaningful. Okay. And so there's an order of operations, everybody, and it's usually clean up the house, then throw the party, or meet your client where they're at. So what I've said previously is true. Most people do not book in for a coach, get coaching sessions, get into personal development when the sun's out. They got a problem. When they start scratching the surface, there's ouchy stories in there. And that pen, brother, can feel like it weighs 600 pounds. So this ain't no free lunch. I get it. And stories kept in the head, which is, again, where most people keep their stories, they swirl. They take up a lot of space. They're seemingly infinite. Where do they start? Where do they stop? And most people get smacked in the face with the worst part of it, and that flinch stress response. And they're like, "Oh, what do I do with this? I'm just trying to cope. You're just trying to maintain." Stories written down, on the other hand, now once a story is written out, now it's finite. One, you've externalized it, and it's finite. It has a beginning word and it has an end word. And then I can see you and myself, we can look at that same piece of paper and see all the squiggles in between, all the words. And what we're about to do, it's not rocket science. And at the same, I'll get this on the table too. At the same time, it is the crown jewel and the Swiss Army knife of the Enlifted method. So this, and it took 10 years to come out of my personal practice to get this to where it is. 4-stepping. It's unique coaching tech to us, and we give it away because it's cool and it works. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand it. It's very similar to an AK-47. It's a conscript weapon. I can take somebody and in a very short amount of time, show them how to do this on other people, and they're going to be cleaning house like nobody's business. Okay, they're going to be taking them, they're going to be unlocking their breath and dismantling the victim mentality. And so we're about to do this with a story that's significant to you. And I also have a question for you. Okay, and I'll address the audience too. So if this resonates with you, not necessarily I suggest watching this all the way through. I actually suggest watching, and I'm not sure what's going to happen. I have an educated guess of what's going to happen. And watch this a couple of times. And if you've got a story that is annoying you, hurting you, or even haunting you, you can pick up a pen and you can get that thing out of your head. Okay? It's your story. Your mom said don't play with your words. Your food. Your mom said don't play with your food. Mark England's telling you to play with your words, play with your stories. Okay? You don't need a doctor to tell you whether you can write something down or not. and a story kept in your head, the chances of you getting some significant resolution on that, slim to none, because of what I said earlier. It swirls. It's in its most raw state. It's in you. And if it, depending on the intensity of the stress response, breath trapped in the chest, you're still in the story. You're still participating. That's why it feels like today, like it did 15 years ago, because time does not apply to the emotional body.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the mechanics of storytelling. And when I know how to do this, I don't have to be a smarty pants coach. I don't have to have all the right answers for you. I don't have to try to motivate you. I don't have to try to inspire you. That is amateur hour coaching. And I'll argue somebody with that. When I have good questions, so answers push, questions pull. Answers push, questions pull. When I've got good questions and I know how to get, I'll tell you what I'm going to do over here on this side of the street. I'm getting, and I keep it there anyway, I'm going to get my breath low and slow and keep it there. Because as the old Enlifted saying goes, good breathing equals good coaching, because good breathing equals good listening, and good listening equals good coaching, and good breathing equals good coaching. Take out coaching and put in shooting. Good breathing equals good shooting, because good breathing equals good listening. You can observe things, as in what you did well, what you did to improve upon. You turn yourself into a good learner. You unlock your breath and you'll learn way faster. So good breathing equals good shooting. And oh, by the way, for people out there that work with people, most coaches, and it's a lack of education, they drama and trauma bond with their clients. What's a drama bond? And this sounds harsh at first. What's a drama bond? Let me back up. We teach our coaches not to believe their clients' stories. We teach our coaches to observe their clients' stories.
I like that.
Yep. It's clean.
Yeah, I like that. There's no bias in it that way, right?
Exactly. And I'm not aggregating anything that the person is paying me to help them change.
Yeah.
Oh, you poor thing. That's horrible that happened to you. What did I just do right there?
That's the problem with VA. Most of the psychologists and people that you work with, or therapists, which whatever, but they will stroke you and say, "Oh, we're going to get through this. It's okay." And I get it now, dude. It's definitely a drama and trauma bonding. Wow.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem.
It's a big problem. And
especially to a dude that's like, just give me the solution. Give me the model. I can do this.
Which are all your fire breathing, meat eating military guys, like dudes. Guys don't want that. They want the solution. And part of that solution is for me to, and let's just keep going with that, because it is important. Why? And if I do a mediocre job, you're going to walk out here with a different and better story than you walked in with. So why should I believe the story that you're starting with when I know if I do a half mediocre job, it's going to change? And then that's the drama bond, which drama bonding leads to trauma bonding. What's a trauma bond? Very simple. It's when, in the context of coaching, and guess what? You do it with people in your outside coaching too, because everything that we're talking about here, it translates. It translates to everything else. Take out shooting, putting any other aspect of your life. Most coaches are not paying attention to their breathing. And when the client goes into a stress response and I go into a stress response at the same time, your breath is trapped in the chest, my breath is trapped in the chest. We have now trauma bonded, and we have got a mess now. We're in a sympathetic state together.
Yeah.
And that further aggregates the thing that you're paying me to help you change.
Which takes longer now.
Correct.
Or maybe never.
Maybe never.
Most likely.
Yeah. And so
holy shit.
When you're working with people, you get your breath low and slow and keep it there and watch what happens. So that's what I'm going to do over here. Now he's got a story, and here's my question for you. Why are you doing this?
Because you told me to, drill sergeant? No.
Connex box.
Connex box right now. Inside story.
Why this story? Why publicly?
Trying to be as succinct as possible here with that. I think it goes back to a lot of the work I've already put in my life. Going 8 years with one story that you know very well. My worst shooting ever was trapped. Still a little bit, maybe. And so I realized, going back to the principles that I always first wake up and believe in every day of the warrior is compassion, caring about something, so I'll fight more. The more I care about something, the harder I fight for it. And then vulnerability has been a big, this has been the chapter of my life is titled vulnerability. This recent chapter is having the courage to be imperfect has been a big struggle for me in my life. Imposter syndrome, maybe, playing the victim, always trying to be the best, always trying to save the fucking world and realizing eventually that you can't. And then starting to explore me, as Tony always says, be your own guru. And I've had wonderful opportunities in the last probably, we'll say few years, 5 years, to have amazing people come into my life and share these types of things with me. And so it's made me more open. I also, going back to the compassion, I care about other people and I want other people to hear these vulnerable models, because vulnerability does not mean weakness. It's absolutely the opposite of weakness. It's the ability to withstand criticism or attack or advice, or, just, hey, this is what you need to do right now. And if I'm going to sit on the corner of my bed and say, how do I make the world a better place? Well, first I've got to be at my best first, because if I'm not, I help no one. And so I think that's one of the biggest reasons for me, just conscious thoughts here to, spontaneously answer that question is, I want to be a better version of myself. I want my family to be a better version of themselves. I don't want people to live in misery, and frustration and disappointment and fear, this false evidence appearing real. And I'm trying to shake it, and I need to shake it, because I realize that if I keep pretending, I'm going to miss out on a lot of things in my life. And that's like a ramp on a C-130 for me, or any airplane I'm jumping out of. It's like, I know what to do, but every time I step to that edge, it's still an unknown, no matter what. And I think a lot of people will stop and go, I'm not going to do that because I'm uncertain. And I've learned to believe that uncertainty is not a problem that ever needs to be solved. And so it makes me want to take a dive into this, no matter how scared I am already. Like, fuck, I've been, since you started this 4-step conversation, I cannot unlock my fucking breath, and it's bothering me greatly. And I don't ever quit at anything I've ever done. So, yeah, let's go.
2 more things, 3, and then real quick, and then we're in. He's giving y'all a gift. Everybody watching this, listening, it's a gift. Again, I don't specifically exactly know what's going to happen. And anybody with his background that has that kind of story written down is going to go into it. The feels will show up on camera.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, it's quite the gift.
Vulnerability is in my opinion, it's the number one judge of a man's character. If you can't be vulnerable, how are you supposed to be a good man? How are you supposed to be better for others that you serve if you can't serve yourself? That's the thing I wish the military, my parents, would have taught me. I think I would have done so much better. I have no regrets, because this is my time to learn this process in this journey. So yeah.
And I'm going to be breathing, like I said, low and slow. My dad passed a year ago. I'm likely going to get into the feels with you. Or if I do, I'm going to be fluid with it too. And here's the difference here. When I'm working with someone, I thought initially the first 5-6 years that I had to be a stone cold killer rock when it came to going into stories with people. Eventually, I remembered that I'm a human being and I have feelings, and I'm supposed to have feelings. There's a major difference between having feelings and keeping the breath trapped in the chest, which is where most people do. That's called a revolution. Revolve. We need a revolution. Everything's going to come back around again, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Get your breath low and slow and feel your feelings, and you're going to have an evolution. You're going to take the R off of it. We're meant to feel things. If you breathe while you're feeling, the thing is going to evolve and change and move forward.
And won't keep coming back around.
Exactly. If you hold your breath while you're feeling your feelings, it's coming back around again. So, and then the last question, then we're in. What's the difference between having this story in your head and having this story written down?
It's a good question because this is the first time I've ever written down something like this.
Yeah.
And some people might think it's a simple story, but you know, everybody has their own personal experience with their stories. And for me, I can see it so much clearer. As soon as I started writing this down a little bit ago, I was hard as hell. And so, you know, I didn't just take a pen to paper because some people might not have the same processes or implementation that others do. So I'm a conversationalist. I like to talk it out. So I put my iPad on, mic on, and started talking and watching it type. And I just kept going with the story as hard as it was for me to try to get through certain spots. That was an easy process for me because as soon as you said, take that pen and put it to paper, I was like, man, that's really hard for me to do. I can program development, you name it, like, you know, any business stuff, no problem at all. This, I haven't done that yet. So I can, but the first time I put it down and I can see it, I feel like I'm already a step into, it's like when we break down a drill, you know, I can just run the drill over and over and over and over and over. Like you see some shit on the internet and you go out and you just run it over and over and over and over. And it's like, no, stop. First round.
So many parallels.
First round only. Oh, so many parallels. And so I'm already starting to see the first round. The first, trigger's not even pulled yet, right? It's what am I doing to set myself up to pull that trigger? And then what's the next thing you do? The rest of the drill? No, you go to the second round. And then the third round. Eventually you get to 12 rounds or whatever the drill is. And then you're like, holy shit, I can see this so much clearer than just naively going out and running through the motions. So yeah, I see it clear already.
It's almost comical to me that you all run stories. That's what you call them.
We do. We don't zero a gun. We run a story on the gun.
What's on that paper?
It's a story. It's my dope. Fuck. That's your past. It's like it sucks because I always tell people like, hey man, your past is something that you simply know. It's dope. It's data, tangible data on a previous engagement. Now what do I do with it? I don't know why the fuck I couldn't see that with my own personal stories. And just so that's, I guess to answer your question, that's what I just saw when I wrote it down. It's like, I've had tangible data this whole time that I could have processed and analyzed. You know, I hear Jared in my head, analyze, and I'm not doing it. And now I'm already starting to. So
step 1, title it, write it out. Conversationally, erring on the side of more detail than less. Full sentences and punctuation. Done. Step 2, read it. See what happens.
All right. I tried to be as punctual as I could.
Perfect.
All right, here we go. The title, The Most Famous Hero You've Never Heard Of. I don't know why that stuck in my head. I'm still trying to process that. The passing of my father started with a call from my brother to get to Knoxville, Tennessee, to visit my father in his final days. So I got on a plane immediately with my son, Hayden, my fiance, Bertoni. My other son was like, I can't do it, Dad. I can't do it. He was a little younger. And I said, hey, that's perfectly your choice. You don't have to be forced to go see a dying man when you just want to remember him the way he is. So I got there as fast as I could with the family. And of course, all the normal thoughts that started going through my mind. I should have spent more time with them. I should have told him more about how not only what he's done for me and my brother and family, but for the entire world. And then when I first see him, it's the hardest sight to see the most powerful man, your action hero, in such a weak, frail, and vulnerable way. Yeah, so another flood of emotions come in, multiplying the thoughts that I had earlier. And when people are dying, I notice families typically lose their minds. They think irrationally. They start to accuse and blame other people and start to think about themselves. Selfishness kicks in. Greed kicks in. Now, at this point, my father was not suffering. And everybody that knows me knows my motto of pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. But he was in pain. And they started to talk about end of life right in front of him, standing right over the top of him. And just previous, he was mumbling in my ear that something we couldn't understand. And I said, Dad, what is it? What do you need? He said, a hamburger. And I turned around, looked at Doc. I said, does a dying man ask for a fucking hamburger? I even threatened the doctor not to talk about the end of life over the top of my conscious father, who's sitting there looking back and forth at us going, what the hell? And I said, if you do, there'll be another end of life discussion. And then the insults, fighting between my brother and my mother continued simply because I asked the most important question, in my opinion, that could ever be asked when somebody's closing out the end of their life. And that question was, how do you want to be remembered? And since my father's voice was hard to understand, because of the breathing tubes and everything else they were putting in him, I asked my mother and my brother this question and how he wanted to be remembered. And they said that he doesn't want to be a burden. He simply wants to be cremated, and that's it. I responded with great frustration and reminded them of who our father was. He was a man that served his country faithfully, not only in the U.S. military, but also was one of the most senior men in a corporation called Florida Power, who would disappear at night for weeks at a time, fighting hurricanes and battling to get people's power back on, saving their lives, rescuing people from homes being destroyed by tornadoes, getting hit by lightning 3 times, plane crashes, the story goes on and on about this guy, rescuing people from their homes constantly. I'd hear these stories. When I'd say, Mom, where's Dad? She'd say, he's out helping people, son. And on top of that, all the other thousands of things that he did when he went on to his later years. He would go down to the memorial cemetery after he retired and put on his old Air Force uniform, even in his early 80s, where he would be on the honor burial teams for any veteran that passed through that cemetery that needed military honors. He would march in color guards and the hot summer, humid days, carrying caskets, folding the flags and presenting them to the family members, even doing the 21 gun salutes. Which I have a side story I've always been fucked up about, because every time I heard a 21 gun salute, I walked out. Even at my own funerals I was at Arlington, I would see the 21 gun salute come, and I would remember my father watching a movie in the living room, and he would just get up out of the room and walk away. I never knew why. Now I do. This was a man that didn't want to be celebrated because he thought it would be a burden? Question mark? I asked. Of course he did. Because he only ever put others first. He gave everything and took nothing. And I started to realize the curse of the military's silent professional. I fought with my mother and my brother to point out, to a point of total breakdown. I told them that I wanted to spend the night with my father, and they all needed to leave so I could tell them everything that he needed to hear of how he helped educate, how he helped guide, motivate, empower, and inspire not only me, my brother, but millions of people in the world. I spent my time with him that night on my knees, all day long by his side, hold his hand as I fed him ice chips so I could understand the words that were coming out of his mouth as best I could. And as it started to get slower in his breath, he said, as I told him about his grandson joining the Marines, which he's in week 9 right now at boot camp. And his last words to me was, "It's Hayden's turn." To chase the monsters away. The next morning, after I decided I can't fight anymore with my mom and my brother, and I've said my piece to my dad, I decided to change our flights and fly back home early. I'm not wanting to see my mother and brother again, to ease their pain and our struggles and allow my father to go as peacefully as possible. And I had made my peace. If I didn't see him pass, I would be okay with it. My son was staying with my brother at the time, 9 o'clock in the morning. Matter of fact, at 9:11, it's a weird number in my life, called me from the hospital. I woke up right before he called, and I remember Tony going, What is it? I was like, I don't know. I have a weird feeling right now. And he called about 14 minutes later and said, Dad, Grandpa's gone. And I told him, okay, I'll be right there. Don't let anybody touch him. I looked at Bertoni. She looked at me and just said one word, go. I don't think I ever ran a mile that fast. We were 1 mile away in the hotel. And I remember just ripping out the door, running through double lane highways, jumping fences, sliding over the hood of one car to fly around the corner of a Walmart where I could see the hospital through the trees. And the night before, walking back from the hospital to the hotel, I remember turning over my shoulder and looking back at my dad's window and saying my final goodbye at the parking lot of that Walmart, to then run back to it as fast as I possibly could. And right when I saw his window turning that corner, something hit me in the chest like in movie, man. And I know this is going to sound crazy to people, but if you know me, you know my relationship with dragonflies. It's weird. It's weird. I looked at it. There was a red skimmer dragonfly. It hit me, grabbed onto me, and I looked down at him and he flew off. And I remember stopping dead in my tracks. And I could have sworn I heard my dad saying, son, you don't have to run anymore. And I walked in calmly. I composed my shit. I walked into the room powerfully and immediately leaned down and held my dad. For about 2 minutes, felt like an hour. And I stood up as everybody was in the room full of sorrow and sadness. And I looked at everybody and I pointed to my father and I said, all of us should aspire to be more like this man. And I went, because there was no military honors or anything at this point, I went and found an American flag. I draped it over his body. And then my brother and my son escorted him all the way, as he used to do for others. I celebrate him every day the best that I can. But I feel the hero with his power and influence to the world should never be forgotten. It's heroes like him that truly make the world a better place than what they came in it. And I strive to be and share with my children to be at least a fraction of what that man was to the world. And I know not everybody has that relationship with their father or their mother or their brothers or the sisters, but you have that relationship with someone. And I thought that would be a story to share.
And someone might have that relationship with you.
Yeah.
Great job on that. Describe the vibe. What are you feeling? Could be a variety of things. Take your time. If it is, name them all. If it's one thing, name that.
I mean, my neck is killing me right now. All of a sudden, pressure from a physical standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, I feel. Slight relief because I've never told that story, you know, because it's so fresh.
Relief of what?
I don't know. Maybe, but it's accompanied by maybe nervousness, maybe fear. Um, my brother, my mother watching this and them saying, "Why would you do that? Why would you air out our family shit?" Like that's always a thing with us. It's weird. I hate it. Lack of vulnerability. They hate when I say the word vulnerability. And I want them to know that I'm doing this out of the most love that I could ever possibly find in the bottom of my heart. And again, sharing our experiences with others. So I guess the nervousness there, but there is a sense of relief that maybe just because I wrote it down, maybe because I just said it for the first time and I can see a process starting and I can start to see that drill being broken down and start to not be as insecure about it, maybe.
Step 1. Title it, write it out, whatever it is. Step 2. Read it. Whatever happens is right. Whatever happens is correct. Step 3. And we'll do a modified application of this because of the length of the story. I was tracking, of course. Go to the part. It might be the last paragraph. There might be 2 last paragraphs. And start where we got a flag and draped it over his body. So step 3 is where you read the same story slower. So step 3 is the slow roll. Again, I don't make the rules. We run all the split tests. It's 30% slower than your normal rate of speech.
30%.
So 70% of your normal rate of speech, starting at we got an American flag. And on a mechanical note, everybody, the mechanics of story, when someone's slow. So what am I here to do? I'm here to help you create space and clarity for you, not have any wise answers or some who cares what. And part of that, a big part of that, comes down to helping you unlock your breath in context to this story. So starting at
just last paragraph.
Just the last paragraph, slow roll. When someone slows down their rate of speech, the breath begins to loosen up. Remember, everybody, the faster the story goes, the harder it is to change. And when that thing is in your head, it's going a mile a what? Minute.
Okay.
And the breath gets locked. Good luck changing it. So slow read, step 3, 30% slower. See what happens.
I went and found an American flag and draped it on his body. And my brother and my son escorted him all the way, as he used to do for others. I celebrate him every day the best that I can. But I feel the hero, with his power and influence to the world, should never be forgotten. It's heroes like him that truly make the world a better place. than what they came in it. And I strive to be and to share with my children to be at least a fraction of what he was to the world.
Nailed it.
That was different.
How so?
Turn the story down a lot. I normally talk at speed, you know me. I have to really catch myself to slow it down. And that was way easier. No emotion came into that. It was more powerfully spoken.
Kind of like a DeLorean drill.
It's a time machine.
It's a time machine.
Wow. Okay. I could break down everything like that, I guess.
Correct.
Just slow the shit down.
Correct. And that's exactly what happens when someone slows down their rate of speech. The breath
Allows you to
loosens up.
breathe.
Exactly. And then you get the evolution from the story instead of the revolution of the story. Step 4, more rocket science. Same last paragraph. Starting with, I went and found an American flag. And at the end of each sentence, I want you to do the unthinkable. So it's the slow read. And then when you get to each sentence, and I'm going to do it with you, you do this. Smooth in, smooth out, on to the next sentence.
So same as an off-gassing technique, man.
Correct.
Ride the exhale.
Correct.
I went and found an American flag and draped it on his body. My brother and my son escorted him all the way, as he used to do for others.
Breathe along with us, everybody.
I celebrate him every day the best that I can. But I feel the hero with his power and influence to the world should never be forgotten. It's heroes like him that truly make the world a better place than what they came in it. And I strive to be and to share with my children to be at least a fraction of what that man was to the world. That's the first time I felt low and slow. Abracadabra, motherfucker. That's interesting.
This is that Wu-Tang shit.
I know it may sound interesting and weird to people, but I've studied a lot of the best that I can with my ability warrior cultures. And this is not hippie shit. This is what every man, every woman, every warrior should do.
To leave the battle at the battle.
And keep the chaos and corruption there.
Correct.
Before you bring it home. Think about the officer every day coming home from a bad day at work, man, and the wife saying, "How was your day, honey?" Be careful the next words that come out of your mouth. That's the 4-step.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
I want to just go. I want to keep going. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go through this whole thing paragraph by paragraph and break. I'm going to start writing down every damn story now. I mean, it's a brilliant. I love it. It's simple, And you hear us, all we do is preach, keep it simple, stupid, man. Because it isn't simple. You aren't stupid. And when you can find peace and acceptance with that, like that's what I think. If you were asking me earlier how I feel, this isn't rehearsed. Obviously, you can't rehearse that. That's peace and acceptance.
We picked this story 20 minutes before we started the show because it took you 20 minutes to get it on paper, which is, guess what? 20 minutes well spent.
And I've been carrying that for a good year. And there's other parts of it that I'll carry. But now at least I have a model to go after. But I'll tell you, man, some of my situations, like I know a lot of people have been into out there, gunfights, car accidents, rape. My queen is a rape victim, and she struggled with it since she was very, very young, because it happened when she was very young. And I think I always looked for, the hindsight, like how do I not suffer? How do I turn those 8 years that I can look at a calendar every single day and go, man, I suffered every single day. I hurt people. I hurt my family. I hurt my teammates. I hurt everything that loved me. Because I could not unlock that darkness and pain. And I think a lot of people out there could benefit from simple models. That's brilliant. I've been through a lot. Going through PTG, and you get into the craziness of how do we take and turn this into a deviation amplification model versus a deviation countering model, blah, blah, blah. And it goes into positive and negative feedback loops and all this other stuff. And I feel like a smart guy until you simplify it.
This is not rocket science, and I don't need a PhD. Come on, man. Look at the source. I'm a former elementary school PE teacher with a handful of MMA fights. I'm not cracking nuclear fission, right?
It's awesome, man. Thank you. Thank you for not only helping me with a story that, is obviously the greatest hero of my life to help manage, and
for sure.
And
my pleasure.
Cope. I don't think cope's the right word, but heal from all the things attached to it. And not only my family, but also everybody else. This is beautiful, man. This is an amazing model that you should share with people. So thank you for sharing that with us today, man, and coming on the bridge.
You're very welcome. And also thank you for this gift that you're giving me, which is the ability to share something that I don't say these words lightly. This shit saved my life. Not only it because it got me out of that victim mentality and gave me something beyond valuable to do with my time. So thank you too.
Thanks, brother.
Pleasure.
Yeah.